Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders, so let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here.
You mentioned perspective a little bit earlier. Perspective, the definition I've always used for that is you're not as great as you think you are, and you're not as bad as you think you are. And remembering that as a coach can be really important, because if you have enthusiasm and you love what you're doing during the high times, that's not very special. But to keep that during the low times, that's the trick, not just for our players, but for us. Over the years, what have you done to keep that perspective in your life of why you're doing what you're doing?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to stay grounded. You have to stay grounded. If we don't put it where it is or where it belongs, and I've done this, I did this for a long time, is that coaches, especially us in the nature, we're selling. We're trying to create buy-in, and we have the ability to be able to do that with all parties. We can do that with our athletes. We can do that with our family. We can do that with our staff, with our bosses, with the AD. We can project really, really well. If we're not careful, we'll project to ourselves. We'll tell ourselves that, this is the order of things. It's going to be my faith. It's going to be my family. And then it's going to be basketball, right? My job or my career. But if we're not careful, we'll say that. But when you look at our behaviors, value things, you can always tell how people value things, right? You tell how people value things based on how they spend their time. You want to know what somebody values? Where do they spend their time? If I'm saying it's about my family, but I'm at the gym all day and I know we got to work, then it's really that the order's really not speaking to it, right? You can also tell how they spend their money, on how they value things. So we don't need to try to project in that, and we need to hold ourselves accountable that we really believe what we say we believe and then act upon it. Even though I had a friend, man, he was really good at it. Richie Alford, he'd be a good one to have on here too.
He would be good, and I've known Coach for a long time. Thank you for that.
Richie used to do this, him and his wife, he'd do this every year. During basketball season, he would pick a weekend, and he'd make sure he'd take Christy somewhere, and they would just go. Middle of basketball season, he'd go, and he'd make sure he spent that time with her. Now, he had to make sure that his mind was focused on with her and not on basketball, even though it was in the middle of the season. But that sent a message that first things first, because if we don't, things get out of whack. So perspective is like that. It's also, that I'm not the know-it-all. I'm not the soothsayer. These kids, we get to work together. They don't necessarily play for me, even though I have the higher calling of serving them in leadership and for a window in their lives. You talk about life being a vapor, right? We get these kids for this small window. How small is that? I saw Victor James. He played for me at one of those teams in Crowley. He's 40-something years old right now. And it was a window. But what has that guy went through all of his life? He's had all these different experiences, having his own sons and having family and having disappointments and celebrations. But as a coach, what if I approached my season with the thought of, could this be a highlight or such a great experience for these kids that they'll remember that down the road? Or are they just competing for wins? And if we don't get there, it was a failure. Man, life is like that, man. We're gonna fail a lot. So how can I approach this in a way, that allows them to, to experience something special, whether it's winning games or whether it's just, hey, I get to go to that gym where that's a special place for me every day.
And the challenge too is not to just have your 1 through 5 feel that way later on, but 6 through 15. Coach Thomas, when I played for Tommy Thomas in high school, and when I was first starting out at Naaman Forest with Jeff Clarkson, I called him, and kind of almost like one of these deals, I asked, what would you do differently, Coach? Like, what's something that I need to think about now, as a 26, 27-year-old? And he said, I wish I would have spent more time with 9 through 12 or something like that. He says 9 through 15. It's so much of his time. Now, Darren and Bracy Wright, Darren Williams, Bracy Wright, maybe they take some attention. That's fair. But he just said, and it's so easy for us to spend the majority of the time with the ones that are on the floor the most. You know, I just talk to them more. We're watching film together more. But it's what we don't want is for the perception to be that the level of their importance is higher. The level of care for them is higher. And so the trick is 9 through 12. What's some advice you have for keeping those relationships strong throughout a year when they're not necessarily the ones putting the ball through the hoop quite a bit?
Well, you know, man, I think, well, we have a saying in our program, and the saying is real simple. It's everybody matters. Everybody matters, right? And so we've got a young man right now that, man, I can't cut him. Can't cut him. There's a time in my life where I used to struggle with those things. Like, what are we going to do with this guy? Man, I can't believe, man, he's taking up space, you know, all this different kind of stuff. Can't do it. I mean, can't do it. Here's the question to ask ourselves sometimes, and I did this. I had a friend challenge me with this. He said, hey, if this was your last year to coach, how would you approach it?
Wow.
How would you approach it? If this is the last year to coach, how would you approach it? I said to myself going into this year, I said, well, can't guarantee a state championship, so I'd probably do a couple of things. You know, I'd understand that I'm the one that's creating the pressure to win, right? I'd probably take care of myself mentally and physically so I could really enjoy it, knowing that it was the last one. Hey, I'd enjoy the game, right? I would really enjoy it. I'd cut up with the referees a little bit. I'd need them a little bit. The coaches that are really, really good, man, I'd make sure I told them. I mean, we think about it with our opponents, but sometimes our pride won't let us tell them. But I'd call them and I'd communicate and say, man, you're doing a great job. You might be doing this better than I am right now. I would enjoy my players every day. I mean, every day, walk in the gym. It's my last year. I'd enjoy them. I'd smile more. I'd laugh. How about this one? I'd play more and worry less about the play. I'd play more and worry less about the play. Now, that'd probably work in couple different ways. It might be I'd laugh and cut up, right? Well, people, man, you can't be like that, you know. Okay, well, maybe I wouldn't do that. Maybe I would have them live, getting up and down, where we would say, hey, they're just rolling the ball out. No, we're getting better in chaos.
Yeah.
Right. I'd play more and worry less about the play. And then I'd probably just, like we said earlier, I'd just make sure it was the best experience that they ever had. So, Matt, here's the question then. If Eric McDade has thought about that and fleshed that out, why didn't he do that every year for 30 years, right?
What are we waiting for? Yeah.
What are we waiting for? Yeah, I like that. What are we waiting for?
Coach, I got some chills there, man. I think that's a new question for the list. And I'm going to say my goal in this whole thing to be honest and transparent. And if I'm thinking something, even though I think it's going to be dumb, I'm going to say it anyway. Coach, I'm a Nickelback fan. Okay. Now, listen, I don't care. There's a lot of Nickelback haters out there and everything. I watched the documentary about them about a year ago, and I forgot how many great songs they had. So in my workout playlist right now is a ton of Nickelback. So I don't care what people think. I like them. But they have a song called If Today Was Your Last Day. And it goes through all of those things that you would do. Like if it was your last day. And it's simple things. It's not like go to Vegas and I'll put it all on. But no, it's how you treat people. And it's how you show up. It's how you enjoy your time. And I think that question is necessary for every day, for every year for us to think about, because the way that we approach that, our players will see it. They'll feel it. Are we looking past this year to next year already? Or are we is it maybe you have a year where the talent's not there, but maybe you think in the future you could be really good? Are you already kind of moving on from this group that needs you right now, that you got to pour every bit of yourself, you got to empty yourself into them, and you got to try to wring out every bit of potential from them? And I just think that's such a powerful question, and that made me think of the Nickelback song.
That's good stuff.
I can't believe I said it.
Hey, dude, I wrote it down, man. Hey, I'm a music fanatic. I wrote it
There's
down.
a lot of us out there, but I don't think many people actually say that they are one. But I said it. You said play more, worry less. I love that idea. And I think I'm aligned with that of in practice, getting us in more 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 games where we're working on our offensive concepts. When the mistakes happen, like Gannon Baker said, we're celebrating the try. We're not resulting in that moment. I think, Coach, we're guilty of contradicting ourselves in the moment. Hey, guys, we're going to play because, man, we want to get in some chaos and we want to learn from this. But then the moment that the inevitable mistake happens, we stop it and we either correct it harshly or even correct in general. We don't allow the process of what more play does, which it appears to be sloppy, and there's going to be mistakes. But I think worry less about what that looks like and let them find their way through. I think you're right on the money.
Yeah. It's the better you are at, I mean, being honest, I mean, basketball's hard, man. It's fast. When I was younger, I used to get out there and play to try to remember. I always used to tell my assistants and our guys I work with, I'd say, hey guys, don't forget to go play a little bit because we need to remember how hard it is. And they'd laugh, this, that, and the other, and stuff. But it's difficult. Right over there in Colleyville, used to go over there and play it Lifetime over there. And man, it was tough. My boys were coming up, my chest would be burning, trying to process, trying to move, trying to make a good pass when you're tired. There's so many factors that are going on. And, these kids I get it. They're athletes and things like that, but there's things going on. And I'd say it's even harder now than what it used to be and what it's like in a pickup game. Because now I'm as a player, I'm going out and I'm going to play, and our kids have great support systems. I mean, they have great support systems. They've got people that are invested in them on so many different levels that will show up to support, that will give them advice on how they need to play in that particular game and all this different types of stuff. So they're managing all these thoughts and all this chaos is breaking out. Now, between those two teams, it's really the one that can handle the chaos the better.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
It's great, right? So it's just trying to figure out, hey, and you know what? And I go back to this right here. It's the unlocking. It's the ones that aren't burdened with fear. Hey, man, look, I get it. I know that you got this going on. Hey, man, I know. Hey, how many points mom and dad want you to score? And they were 20. All right, 20. Well, man, listen, I don't know if that's going to happen, but let's talk our way through this, right? I had a friend, he'd always do some numbers games, right? He'd say, okay, well, let's say you hit a couple of free throws. Let's get you about 4 free throws. Get fouled, get to the line. Let's say you get you about 3 offensive rebound putbacks. Hey, man, that's 6 points. That's 10 points right there. Hey, if you run the floor, you might get yourself maybe 2 buckets right there. That's 14. Hey, get you a couple steals on defense. Man, all of a sudden, you don't have to have the ball. You just went and got the ball all those times. You just went and got it. You're like, man, hey, you're right. But how can we get that fear down so they unlock and they can play under these different conditions that are nothing like we ever experienced ourselves?
Yes. So many good points. I love the idea of reminding myself and our assistants that basketball is hard. I don't know what the moment is when you, and maybe guys that don't play feel this, or didn't play feel this too, but the moment that you kind of stop playing and you become a coach, but then as you get older, you forget what it was like to play and you start to act as if it's easy. And I had coaches in college, or no, actually this was over in Iceland. This head coach would say, nice guy, but he would say, it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And there are multiple times where I remember thinking, man, I'm the one with the ball in my hands. It's not that simple. Like Matt Garnett, one of my buddies, he always says, like, if people are surprised that we lost to somebody, he'd be like, they practice too. Like, they're doing that too, but it's not as simple as that. And I think a great thing for us to do is to let our players know that we recognize that. Like, when we're asking them to do action, now listen, I understand this is difficult. You're going to have to fight really hard to get over this. You might get bumped. Instead of what one of my assistants in college said was, just run through the screen. Just run through that screen, push him in the bleachers. I'm like, that dude's 7 feet tall, 300 pounds, coach. In my head, I'm thinking, I'm not running through that. I'm going to airplane around it, probably get the crap hit, but coach, we can't forget that, because that leads to the friction, the disbelief that the players have in us, that we know what we're talking about. We got to remember that.
We do. And we have to allow tracks for self-discovery, because when you lay out variables X, Y, Z, A, B, C, now I've given all these different options to where I'm coming in, and it causes me to pause, because I have to figure out which one am I supposed to take, which slows my feet down, which slows my brain down. But if I allow some different tracks of self-discovery, hey, like that screen, get through it. So watch, who has these things figured out? So going back as a young coach, I remember the guys that we looked up to: Chris Dyer, Robert Hughes, David Milson. We would ask them questions, Rusty Siegler, Jeff Cody. Hey, how do you coach this? Well, I just tell them to get through it. Or I just say, you better find a way. You better box him out. I don't care how you do it, but get it done. Well, they're freeing them up. These guys, okay, offense. So here's what coach would say this right here. This is really good, right? Tracks of learning and freeing people up. Coach, how do you win a basketball game? Coach Cody would always go back to this. He'd say, well, I remember I sat down and I listened to Henry Iba, and he said, there's 5 things you got to do to win a game, right? And I still use these. You got to be able to execute your offense from the head of the circle in. You got to be able to stop somebody defensively from the head of the circle in. You got to win the battle of the boards. You got to break all types of pressure. And then you got to win the transition game. Don't give up any, but go get you some. And if you can do those 5 things, you give yourself a chance to win. So I've always tried to present it that way. And there's different tracks for self-discovery. Hey guys, if we're turning the ball over in the half-court offense, no matter what we're running, we ain't gonna give ourselves a chance. Let's take care of it. Hey, if we're not getting back and we're getting beat in transition, that's one of those things we talk about. So the simpler we can make it, I think faster we can get, right? Our kids can become more reactionary.
I wonder how many times we just out-technique ourselves. We just want to have the best technique, and I'm all for footwork when we shoot and how we close out, but how we block out. I used to talk about, well, first you go power base to power base. And it was kind of the Rick Torbett stuff. And I wanted to put on a clinic for my guys. But then I realized when the board was coming out there thinking, okay, power base to power base, and then forearm, and then turn. The play's over. Like, you missed them. It went by. So I do think we got to be careful not making things more difficult than what they need to be.
Yeah, you're right. I remember there was I don't remember, maybe it was Wayne Cobb. Wayne Cobb coached at East Central. I played at East Central for a little bit up in Ada. And I remember I came in as a transfer from Grayson College, and we were doing some rebounding, and the ball was going up, and he would say, why are you doing that? I'm trying to box out, right? I said, I'm trying to keep him from getting it. He says, you can jump. You're 6'4". You can jump. Go get the ball. Right? So and it's funny how there's so many different ways to teach this game. And one of the things, you talk about great coaching, right? Good coaching. I think one of the things is that we find ourselves in it, and you find out who you are, you find out what you believe. And when you go with what you believe, what ends up happening is you find out that it comes across better. You also find out that there are people naturally in opposition of the way you approach things. And it challenges you, all your insecurities, and you have to figure out that it's okay for somebody to disagree with how I see this game. And when you come to that point, and that takes some maturity. Like, that's why I love how you play, right? I love how you do your thing, and I love how your guys shoot it, and because what I see somebody that's very confident in how they're approaching something. They believe in what they're doing. Their kids believe in what they're doing. We don't sit back in judgment of each other because we're all doing it different. But the great coaches, they know what they believe and they do it. And that guy was telling me, I don't believe in that. Go get that ball. And I was like, well, okay. So you just got, I'm not going to run for you. So I'm going to do what you say.
And it kind of goes back to our play more, worry less. Joe Crispin, read his book, Offense Wins, one of the best books I've ever read. And he said, let the game teach the game. I think we can out technique or out drill ourselves too much to where we want guys to block out better, put them in opportunities where there's live blockouts again and again and again. And you can go beyond the one-on-one toss off the glass, but the more that you play 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and the more value that you give to an offensive rebound, you give offensive rebound 3 points, they're going to be crashing harder and they're going to be blocking out harder. You start to, and you've heard this, and we all know it's what you get, what you emphasize. But something like blockouts, let the game teach the game. Instead of in a 2-on-0 or hitting a pad and blocking out and go where everybody looks really good, we got to test if those habits are there. We got to know who we trust to actually do that in the game. And we've got to be able to, from those practice situations, be able to talk to the player and possibly the other stakeholder in their family, which is the parent. Why is Johnny not playing? Johnny has a really tough time blocking out. You know how I know this is we play a lot of live games. You're welcome to come to practice and see. We play a lot of live games, and that's not a habit that he's ingrained yet. Or are you teaching him? Heck yeah, we are. We're in those situations every day, and we play a lot of those games. And I just think letting the game teach it, letting the game teach spacing. I could blow my whistle every time a player's getting creepy out of the corner, every time that we don't have a corner filled, every time that we're attacking a single gap. But you know what? Single gaps lead to turnovers. So I'm going to let them turn it over in the game. And after it's done, we huddle up. Hey, I'd love to ask you, what do you think? Why do you think the turnover happened there? And the guy would do this. That was a single gap, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a single gap. What could you do instead? I think helping the game teach it instead of us helicoptering, but just flying in and saving them from that, man, let them fail.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.